Hi everyone, welcome back to the Watch Insider. My name is Brian and thank you guys for logging on. We were on hiatus last week. We had a little last minute thing that came up on Wednesday, but we are back with lots of great watches and hopefully lots of good questions to answer. So my name is Brian, you guys already know that. This is Tim Masso and thank you guys for logging on. We are in the works of putting together a live show on how to use the WatchBox app. Our in-house development team is putting that all together so that it works seamlessly for the show, and we should hopefully have that in the coming weeks. In the meantime, why don't we do a quick little wrist check here to get us off started?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you guys know me. I'm actually going to fire this up because you've seen the watch many times, but you don't always get to hear it. This is my JLC Grande Memovox Perpetual calendar. It's a watch that is both a hanging bronze gong alarm and a perpetual calendar, proof that blue dials were a thing before the current fad for blue dials. This watch was made back in 2001. Now you can see that little radial display. That's what actually indicates the alarm time. And what you want to do is you want to line it up just so.
It's loud.
It is, isn't it?
I could see you like sleeping next to that with like one of those like tubes of paper that's like to actually use it as an alarm.
Back in the watch you want days when we would pick the absolute cheapest flights because we had to, this thing woke me up for a 3:30 a.m. red eye out of Chicago.
Oh, AC just kicked on. Thank you.
It's 4,000 degrees in here, guys. Give us a break. And if you're wondering,
welcome
I forgot
summer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I forgot my glasses just in time for summer downstairs. That's why I keep them on my head.
But today, I'll let Tim show it. Today, I am wearing a 5980 1A in stainless steel. This is a watch I actually haven't worn in a while, but it feels so good to have it back on the wrist. This is, as you can see, the original variation of the watch with a blue dial. The date is not yet set, simply because I have to fast forward it one day. But amazing watch, and it is absolutely crazy to see what has happened with this watch, you know, in the last 3 to 6 months in terms of market value. So I guess, you know, lucky me.
This is the late great 5980 1A. No longer available. I find the 5990 is just a little bit too much. The 5980 was a good balance between 5711 and chronograph functions.
Yeah, and we actually just took in, you know, it's crazy how few we now see, but we actually just took in trade. It's absolutely like 99.9% mint, unpolished, originally sold by us, blue dial 5980. So
okay.
That'll, you know, I'm sure, I don't know if it'll make it to the site or not, or it'll probably be sold beforehand, but if anybody's looking for a 5980 that's perfect and pristine and unpolished, you know, we happen to have one in stock, and feel free to email me for details.
So we're off with 2 blue dials to start the night. I will say this, guys, 5980s, I probably see one of those for every 4 or 5 5711s.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy just how scarce the watch has become, and you know what? I actually only think that I even have it because I got it at the right time. But no, I mean, you know, obviously mine is well worn and enjoyed, and you know, I sit there and I look at the one that's absolutely perfect, and I think to myself like, you know, should I swap it for the pristine one? And you know what? No, like I love that it's beat up, and you know, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, that's what the laser welder's for, guys. Patek will put it right in the end.
I would never polish this thing. I love it.
There you go.
More beat up, the better.
Even better. All the scars and the memories.
But we have some great watches on the table tonight, and one of which is a watch that's actually my most recent acquisition and something that I had been looking for quite a while, and I finally pinpointed exactly what I wanted and, you know, hopped on it when it became available.
Yeah, definitely.
But I'll get us started off with a, why don't we get started off with a cool Patek?
Yeah, definitely.
So here we have a 5135 rose, and not just your typical 5135 rose. This is a limited edition to 100 pieces for the Russian market, 5135. And what makes this watch so special is the fact that it has a black dial. The watch was actually never produced with a black dial except for this edition. And the watch, which we have on the table here, came with specialized custom cufflinks also. That came as part of a set. So black cufflinks with the Calatrava cross emblazoned on the front with the black dial. It's an awesome watch. I actually think that the 5135, while not such a huge commercial success when it was launched or when it was being produced, has since come back, you know, to being in much greater demand, given that it's, you know, it's a larger watch. And you know, the rose against the black is absolutely beautiful. It probably should have been made this way back when they were making the watch. and overall just a really cool piece.
Yeah, every once in a while, Patek will do something really cool for the Russian market. They actually made a white gold full blue dial 5960 before the regular production blue dial 5960 came out, and that Moscow edition, it's usually the Moscow boutique, remains a very highly sought piece. I'll also say this, the 5020 wasn't cool once either because it was rather oddly shaped. Get ahead of the market with stuff like this. This is an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, this is an example of a watch. We have actually never seen one, and we had the opportunity to purchase it, and you know, I said, like, this is the kind of watch that I think there's still a void in the market, in the sense that a lot of consumers don't even know it exists. And you know, it's a good opportunity to buy a truly limited edition watch from Patek Philippe that happens to be one of their most iconic complications at actually a reasonable price point as it stands relative to some of the other what the limited editions are doing. And it's a great watch. You know, it's a black dial annual calendar. It's a beautiful piece. It's not like it's an ugly edition. You know, it happens to be, you know,
black dials
gorgeous,
with rose gold.
and it even comes with
they're
documentation saying it's a limited edition. You know, I'm a big fan of the watch.
I'll say this, regional editions and micro editions are like the great next frontier of collectible watches. There have been so many regional boutique, special dealer, special occasion editions by great brands, especially Sincere Watch and the Hourglass out of East Asia, Chrono Passion and Dubuis out of Paris, Siddiqui and Sons. There's been so much cool stuff that's never been internationally known. Someday, I think there's a great book to be written about regional editions.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll write it, but that's a wonderful topic to tackle.
Yeah, and to answer Hein Rising's question, yes, the cufflinks actually do come with the watch. And guys, feel free, you know, please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. It can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about the watches that we're showing you. Anything that comes to mind, anything that we can answer, that's what the show is all about. So, moving right along, you know, all these watches come from the vault and are things that are either just came in, coming in, or you know, are currently available. So this particular watch right here is the Ulysse Nardin Executive Tourbillon Skeleton. So this to me is an example of everything that Ulysse Nardin is doing right now. You know, beautifully executed watch, skeletonized dial, tourbillon, all under $40,000. And I just think that this watch sort of exemplifies, you know, both the aesthetic of Ulysse Nardin as well as good value. And you know, I'll let Tim go into a little bit more on the mechanics of the watch, and then we can, you know, discuss it further from there.
Well, the first thing I love about this watch is that it works as a watch. You can see that the hands are easy to trace, and it's actually easier to read than something like a Movado museum watch because you do have stylized Roman numerals and hour indices. You've also got a gorgeous and completely open tourbillon. The advantage of skeletonizing this dial isn't so much to make the watch look gossamer and evanescent, it is that, but it's also to open up many diagonal views of the tourbillon carriage and its silicon escapement. Now, one feature we should mention is that this is a manual wind watch of the most extraordinary variety. 7-day power reserve. It's actually a little bit more than 7 days, 170 to 172 hours. And the watch is 45 millimeters, but in ceramic bezel, and titanium, the watch is light on the wrist. I need to do a wrist shot of this one because you need to see the 45 millimeter watch, the 43 to 45 millimeter watch, that's the oversized range, but they don't all wear the same. The Executive can be unwieldy in its precious metal iterations. This one's easy to wear on my 16 centimeter wrist, and again, you've actually got loomed hands. So this is a watch, a rare tourbillon skeleton watch that's designed to be worn on a daily basis. And like Brian said, it has the look of Ulysse Nardin, and with the silicon escapement, it has the tech of Ulysse Nardin.
Exactly, and you know what? You've got the titanium case, ceramic bezel. I just think that it's a beautifully executed watch. It came in at the right price point. This is just as easily a watch that you know, you could see a brand coming and saying it's $65,000 and it becomes a bit of a flop. But they didn't do that. It came in, I want to say $38,000 retail, which was spot on. It was underpriced relative to pretty much all other tourbillons in the market from a comparative brand, and you know, it actually was a commercial success.
I would say between the Freak, which in every iteration from the Freak Vision to the Freak Out that just came out, the silicon technology that goes into that watch, not just in the escapement, which they've been doing for a while, but the constant force mechanism, the full drivetrain. It's stunning stuff. UN has really redefined itself over the last 2 model years. They're no longer just purveyors of giant yellow gold dive watches. They've become a little bit more sophisticated. I think there's a level of refinement that, to be perfectly fair, was a couple of years in the work and dates back to the Patrick Hoffman era. But there's some great stuff that's come out the last 2 years at SIHH. This isn't even close to their least expensive tourbillon.
Yeah.
They have an enamel dial
That just came out.
for like 28 grand,
Yeah.
and it's 100 meters water resistant.
Yeah, so, I think that the brand's moving in the right direction, and I think that you're going to see, I don't want to use like a boat reference with Ulysse Nardin, but righting the ship, so to speak. But no, so moving right along here, I think we should talk about this beautiful platinum beast next. Here on the table we have the 5204 Blancpain. So what that means is it is a perpetual calendar, split second chrono, except it's also a flyback. So this beautiful beast comes in at 42 millimeters, and as mentioned, it's a perpetual calendar, split second chrono, with a white dial. So beautiful watch, 42 millimeter platinum case. You'll see on the back, this is actually #1, which, I was surprised when I saw that. Very cool. Wish it was an exhibition case back, but, again, you can only ask for so much. And what makes this watch so cool is that, again, Patek charges, I want to say, just under $300,000 for this watch. And, obviously, again, there is a difference between this and Patek's 5204. But that being said, this watch is, listed on our website for under $35,000. Where else can you get a split-second perpetual calendar flyback chrono in platinum from a brand like Blancpain for under $35,000? I mean, again, that's just where there is such extreme value in the market, ripe for the picking.
This is literally an overwhelming watch. Platinum class, platinum case, big, deep, heavy. You put this on your wrist, you can't ignore the fact that you're wearing something exceptional. It's not overbearing, it's a lovely kind of luxury. When this watch is on the wrist, you have the feel that you're intimately connected with your watch in a way that a titanium, a ceramic, a carbon case never can be. We just saw the Ulysse Nardin in ceramic and titanium. This is almost the counterpoint to that because it is so physically massive, so traditional, and with twin column wheels and a vertical clutch mechanism, you're getting a hell of a lot of tech in this timepiece. Now, about that solid caseback, I have seen Blancpain on some of these higher-end complications honor requests for custom display casebacks. So if you ever send the watch in for service at Blancpain, ask. The worst they can say is no, and they're likely to say yes. I've seen that request honored a couple of times. It would be worthwhile because what you're getting is based on a Frédéric Piguet 1186 base. So it is the 1185, but with the flyback and the split-second functionality. And it is rare to find a watch that is both a split-second chronograph and a flyback that can be reset and restarted with a single push. Plus, again, perpetual calendar chronograph, whether you're a lawyer billing time or you're dating memos and correspondence, there's a complication on this watch that you're going to use every single day.
Yeah, and I do think that the dial, there are some people in the chat talking about how the dial looks a little bit cramped. And it is. I mean, I do tend to agree that they smushed a lot on there, and I think that they could have probably made a lot of the features a little bit smaller in order to fit a little bit better.
That said, the 42 millimeter version is the one you want because if you're willing to forego the split-second functionality, this is what the 38 looks like, guys. So all but the split-second functionality, this is the steel Lamar Perpetual Calendar chronograph. Also a flyback chronograph, also a perpetual calendar, automatic winding in stainless steel. One distinction this one has is that you can actually see the movement. It does have a display casebacks. These watches were built with both solid and display casebacks. Like I said, you gotta ask.
Yeah, and again, I think that is one of the drawbacks on the watch is that you have such a complicated movement in there with no visible caseback. And I wonder, do you think that's because just there's a lack of finishing on the movement? What do you think the reasoning was for not having display caseback on that?
It's not, because here's the thing. It's a converted automatic that has an ugly winding bridge vestige, so they don't want you to see it.
Right.
That's why. It's because it was originally a 185 that became a 186 that became a combination of perpetual calendar flyback Rotrepont. And a lot of times when you convert a automatic to a manual, you wind up with the visible mounting points of the automatic system and its bridges. And it's not necessarily that the watch isn't finished to a high standard. It is. If you opened that case back, it would be beautifully finished. It's more that the architecture itself isn't as poetic as a manual that was born that way.
Right. And I think that, some of the folks would love a wrist check here just so they could see how the size of the 42 looks on the wrist.
Yeah, definitely. It's actually more compact than you think. These Blancpain watches are all designed to have a very compact lug-to-lug dimension. I'd be shocked if this is more than 50 millimeters lug-to-lug. My wrist is tiny. This is a 42 millimeter watch. It's more thick than anything else, but even when you look at it in profile, that would have no trouble with a sport jacket cuff. That would have no problem with a suit jacket cuff. It's thick, but it's not overbearingly thick, and it's not terribly sheer-sided either. There's a nice slope to the double Gadron bezel, so you should be able to get it under a cuff of most varieties, and it's very narrow across the wrist, so it's not going to flare out beyond your wrist if you're a little smaller of arm like I am.
Yeah.
And it's loomed. It's beautifully loomed. We have to have loom shots in this show someday.
We got to figure out a way to turn the lights off and then be able to turn it back on. Oh, we can do that now? Oh, wow, that's great.
But can we focus on the dial? We'll test that technology before we screen test that technology.
No, so moving along here, I think I've mentioned it on the show before, but I have increasingly, I've always been a fan of 1990s Dubuis, but I've increasingly been getting more and more into it, and I've been on the hunt for a Sympathy watch that's right size, right complication, right dial combination, and I haven't found one that sort of fit the bill. The last time we took one in, it was a Perpetual chrono, and it's just a little bit thick. And when you sort of look at a watch and you know that you really want it, but it doesn't fit the right way, and you just can't mentally get there.
Yeah.
So I was going through that for a while, but finally we took one in. I absolutely love it. It's my first Roger Dubuis and first piece of his from the 90s, and it just so happens that it's extraordinarily similar to the one he himself wore for the duration of his time.
Just a few differences on the dial, to be honest.
Differences here, but I'll show it off. So this is a late 90s Roger Dubuis, Sympathy bi-retro perpetual calendar in the 37 millimeter Sympathy case in rose gold. So this is a watch. It's my first Roger Dubuis. I'm actually missing a lug screw there that I have to go ahead and order. Probably get a new strap for.
That's the nice thing about being a Dubuis dealer.
Exactly. But I'd been on the hunt for a while, and I finally, I actually traded in a Vacheron to get the watch. So I have sort of a rule that if I want to pick something else up, I like trading something in its place. So I traded in a Vacheron, and I picked up a Dubuis. And as I sort of go down the rabbit hole of 90s Dubuis, I keep finding more and more cool things that I just think. I think that these are going to be watches that, over the next 3 to 5 years, there's another run on them similar to what occurred with F.P. Journe.
And it's doubly true because, unfortunately, the man is not with us anymore. But the thing about early Dubuis is that it was a combination of uncompromising quality. You can see at the top of the dial that it's a Besançon Observatory chronometer with a Besançon Observatory chronometer certificate, and it's signed Geneva Hallmark. So you had that uncompromising standard of finish, style, and accuracy with a very avant-garde aesthetic. It wasn't afraid to take that quality and package it unconventionally. Now you have a gorgeous gloss ivory dial base here with a very similar aesthetic to the one that Roger Dubuis himself wore. Now it was a combination of a collaboration between Dubuis and Agenour of Jean-Marc Viderecq, who helped Roger Dubuis design the very first Harry Winston retrograde perpetual calendar in 1989. And so that partnership was actually kept up for the early days of a company founded in 1995 as Sogem, and those initials basically added up to Geneva Watch Company. That became Roger Dubuis subsequently. And this case shape, which is almost like a tortured liquid metal that's been drawn out and flash frozen, it almost has a fluid form to it, but you can see it's echoed in the shape of both the dial and the sapphire.
And that's what I love so much about it is that, you've got a very unique case, and they could have just as easily done a round crystal with it. and sort of cheapened out, so to speak. And what I love is that the crystal is the same shape of the watch, which at the time was extraordinarily expensive to do, but it was just one of those added touches that made the brand so special.
The thing about that specific shape is this case and crystal profile were actually proposed to Dubuis by a valet de jeu case maker, and Dubuis loved it. The problem was towards the year 2000, as Carlos Diaz, the business partner in Roger Dubuis, began to count the pennies and began to cut costs a little bit. Dubuis himself became more remote from the process of creating the watches. They did actually go to a round crystal. These early watches are the purest example of Dubuis' actual vision for what his company should have been. And they're the ones to own.
And answering Mark S.'s comment, what is a Sympathy watch, ? Sympathy refers to the case shape of the watch. So
there were two initial lines, Homage, which was more traditional, think a Calatrava type case, and then there was Sympathy, which was the shaped case, that drawn, pointed form that you just saw here. That's the Sympathy.
But seems like there's a lot of people in the chat that don't love the watch, but again, that's
who the hell
why,
cares?
Yeah,
he buys what he wants.
That's why it's a personal thing. Can't please everybody. But so in lieu of bringing on a really cool 90s Dubuis, I brought on one other here that I will let Tim show off here, which is absolutely awesome. So here we have a rose gold case with almost copper indices, salmon dial, and again, I think this exemplifies the best of what Roger Dubuis was doing at the time. And I really do think that these watches are currently available at really compelling prices. And I think that you're going to see that it's product like this that's going to quickly appreciate in the marketplace.
I just can't overemphasize how magical those polished metallic copper numerals are. And you'll note they're radially arrayed. Gorgeous blued spade and, as you can see, broadsword style hands. Broadsword for the minutes, spade for the hours. Note that, again, we've got a shaped sapphire. This time we have a cambered crystal and a cambered case. Even the case back sapphire is cambered and arced, so it actually arcs over the wrist. You've got another Roger Dubuis Geneva Hallmark finished movement. This was a series of 28, so you're not going to see another one. The other thing that's important to note is that it's based on what would today be called the Breguet 8815, born as the Longines L990. It is a truly ultra-thin, automatic winding, twin mainspring barrel high horology movement that has been used over the years by Ulysse Nardin, Dubuis, Vianney Halter, Breguet, and many others. It's one of the greats of Swiss watchmaking, finished to a Dubuis standard here in a watch that can't be mistaken for anything but Roger.
Yeah, and I mean, again, absolutely amazing colorway, and I think that this is, this was coming out at a time in which I think Frank Mueller was also very popular, and they were sort of the two avant-garde watchmakers at the time that were really changing the game. You had Roger Dubuis with this watch, the Sympathy case. You had Frank Mueller with the Curve X, and they were really pushing the boundaries of what watchmaking was at the time, and sort of said, you've got rectangular, you've got round, and we're going off and doing our own thing and changing the game. And that's actually what really launched a lot of the niche manufacturing that you see today.
The key difference there is that
they got acquired by the groups.
Well, yeah, of course.
That's the
Vartan Cermakis, I think, still owns Frank Mueller, but at the time, the Frank Mueller and the Roger Dubuis both were spectacular in style, but the Roger was as horologically interesting as it was visually interesting. Always finished beautifully, always with display casebacks. I think there was just a little bit more to them than the Frank Muellers. They were actually as substantive as a Patek Philippe or a Vacheron from the period.
So, moving right along here, we've got one more amazing watch on the table, and what drew me to this watch, well, A, it's absolutely amazing, but B, I don't know, for those of you that saw the most recent auction, a Patek Philippe 2526 in platinum on a bracelet, which I think was the only known example that had turned up at auction yet. It's just sold for $650,000. So this happens to be a 2526 in yellow. For those of you that don't know, the 2526 was actually Patek Philippe's first automatic movement. So here you have a 2526 in 18 karat yellow gold. You've got a white enamel dial. This is actually a first series, meaning this was the first iteration of the watch. And if you zoom in there, you will also see that beautiful Tiffany stamp on top. So this watch, Obviously, you can't really compare it to between the yellow and the platinum, given that rarity is a big factor in terms of what it sold for at auction. But, this overnight has become a very special piece.
And I'll also say, don't get hung up on case metals because condition is its own kind of rarity. If you look at the condition of this ivory enamel Tiffany co-signed dial, it is immaculate. There's no tarnish, there's no staining, there's no cracking. And that is one of the few banes of these old enamel dials. They do crack, especially when handled roughly by unqualified watchmakers. This watch is a survivor in every sense. It's got the 12600 AT 30 jewel automatic winding Gyromax movement inside. Absolutely beautiful, and though you can't see it, the ultimate sign of watchmaking integrity, it is a Geneva hallmarked caliber underneath a solid case back, one of the most advanced of its era. Now critically too, and this is often overlooked, this watch features its original interlocking double P style crown. The horizontally opposed double Ps were the correct crown for the period, and they have an immense amount of character. Very few of these survive matched to their original watches, so that's something you always want to look for when you buy one of these. You also want to look for full lugs that still have their volume and form. This has that, and of course, being a watch introduced in 1953, only made in about 600 copies, all told, all metals, all dials, and phased out by 1960. Every example is rare, and condition, provenance, integrity, all of that adds up to the ultimate value of the watch. It's not just about the case metal.
Yeah, exactly. And, again, what we look for in these 2526s is, very much the condition of the dial is, enamel is one to crack or erode over time. This watch has been beautifully maintained. My guess is it was probably a safe queen. And, the 2526 has traditionally been a watch that was sort of, I don't know if it was under-marketed at auctions, but it didn't always receive the praise that some of its siblings, from the same era have received. And I think that given how difficult it is for the enamel dials to maintain over time, finding really good pristine examples of the watch is few and far between, and I think that you're going to see a rapid appreciation of these pieces.
That's a fact. As recently as 4 years ago, these could be picked up for $10,000. Like as recently as 4 years ago. So there's been a huge ramp up in the market for these, and whereas I think some sports watches right now are overhyped on the auction scene and some secondary brands are a little bit oversold, I think the 25-26 market has room to run, and I think that it's got a lot of value headroom above it before it reaches carrying capacity. That's a gainer, and that's one for the future.
Exactly, because this is a watch that, again, as you said, there's only around 600 examples that had been made, and a lot of those watches over time, as the dials would break or damage or things would go wrong, Patek, of course, would step in and have to fix the watch, and very often that resulted in a dial change or a correction that would, seemingly at the time be normal and you would think nothing of it, but now would alter the secondhand value of the watch.
Or something like a first series dial would be replaced with a second series dial. And if you look at this watch, you do get close to it, you can see the little dimples under the indices for the indices that were actually inserted into dimple outlines in the dial. That's the distinction between a first series 25-26 and the second series. Both enamel, but one had the index physically inserted into a hole that was made to fit like a socket on the dial. And you can see the evidence of that around the actual index. There's a little bit of a dimple, so they're the dimple dial. That's the first series.
Yeah. So these are all the watches actually that I have brought out tonight. Should we do a quick recap of what's going on with the Bird Vaillet?
Yeah, let's remind everyone that we're actually entering the home stretch here. I believe we're down to our last week. The Bird Vaillet horological sculpture is an interesting concept whereby reclaimed components that are past their service life are actually taken from the watchmaker's bench and saved from the scrap bin. So they're hand selected, they're then ultrasonically cleaned, given a secondary hand cleaning and polish to bring out the luster, the texture, the colors, and the depth. And then they're suspended and evenly spaced. It's not as if these things all work out. Like enamel dials, there is a very high rejection rate for these lucite sculptures. Luscious lucite, multiple layers. It actually takes about 3 weeks to make one of these from start to finish, and they are baked for 8 hours in an autoclave, much like carbon fiber is created and then stabilized to remove all of the chemical solvents and set it so it doesn't continue to set after the fact. This is baked and stabilized in an autoclave, and then it's hand finished. This is a display model that's a little worn out. It's my personal Bird Vaillet. It's not the one you will win. This one is representative in form but not in detail. Yours will be in immaculate condition, complete with the sterling silver engraved plaque on the back. Now all of these come with certificate of origin, the leather tote bag, polishing cloth, and a spectacular handmade wooden box, a display case that Bird Vaillet is just as excited about describing and announcing and marketing as they are the skull itself. They have many sculptures, you will get the skull, but I cannot overemphasize that like buying an old Vianney halter Antica, the box is as important as the work itself because of the amount of energy that goes into making it. So you're getting a $2,700 retail value between all the accessories and the skull. Just go to the link that is in the description and click it. You can participate in our social media, and if you do, it will actually weight your chances of winning the raffle. Like, subscribe, or interact in any way. You help your cause, and you might even have some fun.
Yeah. And I'm going to answer 2 more questions from the chat just before we go. 1989 OSU, just asking a little bit about the Tiffany Stamp. So Tiffany was the first retailer for Patek Philippe in the United States. They have a very long-standing relationship with the brand. As a result, similar to how you see Bayer, Goebel, and dials from around the world, Tiffany was able to put their stamp on the dials of the watch when they were first being sold, and then all the way up until now. It's only on certain references. Certain references they don't put it on, and it's just you know, a way, you know, that those watches are differentiated from others, you know, in production. Over time, what's happened is with some of the vintage watches on the market is that, you know, if there's only 600 watches made of a particular reference like the 2526, it's sort of just a way to now narrow down even further the field of the watches. So, you know, how many could they have sold? Maybe 20, you know, 30 with the stamp in general.
Everything that was made, survivors today, superb condition survivors, Series 1 dials, Series 1 dials with a Tiffany stamp. That's how it works.
Yeah. And then lastly, Yahya Bauba asked about a 37mm time-only Sympathy. You know, again, I can't say enough good things about the watch. I'm a big fan. You know, white gold black dial I think is one of my favorite variations of the time only. And, you know, as I said, I think that on, you know, 90s Dubuis, I think that, you know, we've hit the bottom in terms of the resale market, and I do think that there's going to be, you know, a surge up over the next 5-10 years in terms of value as collectors start looking for other cool, unique things to get into that were, you know, that are, you know, pretty limited.
I'll say this, I actually think the rebound is already underway. I think the bottom out for 90s Dubuis was 2014, 2015. And I know that because pieces we sold out of the old Watch You Want company, I now see, I know what we paid for them wholesale, and I know what we sold them for retail. And I can tell you now that the wholesale looks a lot like the retail number from back then.
Yeah.
Like, we're not buying those cheap anymore, and we're not selling them cheap when we get them.
Yeah. So that's all that we have for tonight. Guys, feel free, if you ever have any questions, you can always email myself or Tim. We're always available. So this is the Watch Insider. My name is Brian.
I'm Tim.
And thank you guys for logging on.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Nice watches. A lot of